In May 2025, Grammy Award-winning producer and DJ Kaytranada abruptly deactivated his Twitter account, leaving fans and observers speculating about the cause. Reddit threads and Lipstick Alley pointed towards the same thing: his dating preferences. Specifically, his apparent pattern of partnering with white men. What began as a lighthearted tweet about liking white boys spiraled into backlash, with users flooding his replies, calling him every white boy lover name in the book. His response, blocking accounts and ultimately deactivating his profile, reignited a conversation we know all too well. Why does Black queer success so often coincide with white romantic partners, and why does it stir such tension? Gays, let us discuss. Ello Bandannas, welcome here and welcome back to my YouTube channel where people watch me speak about whatever crosses my mind and I'm okay with that. I want to start off by saying thank you so much for 10,000 subscribers. I cannot believe there are 10,000 of you here now. So welcome if you're new here. I hope you love it. I hope you continue to interact and grow with me. I also want to apologize for taking so long between uploads. I took a little break to go bounce on it. I did, yeah. Just kidding. Wimbledon had me in a chokehold. I was rooting for Taylor first, but he went up against Alcaraz and we saw how that went. I was really sure that Alcaraz was going to take it for the third time, but Sinner said, not this year. But do you know who really won? My gay ass. Something about two hot men passionately hitting a ball back and forth for 3 hours just turns me into Teshy Duncan. But let me not turn this video into me thirsting over white men, though. That is kind of why we're here, aren't we? And just so we're clear, if anything I say hits too close to home, sweetie, I'm throwing that stone from a glass house, okay? In today's video, we are discussing the successful Black gay white partner phenomenon because at this point, the pattern is undeniable. From Hollywood to politics, from fashion executives to professional athletes, you don't have to look too far to see high-profile Black queer people partnered with white lovers. One thing about patterns is that they demand more than just observation, but interrogation as well. We are clearly asking ourselves what makes this pattern so predictable, how do power and privilege shape even our most personal relationships, but most importantly, why does queer Black success always lead to white love? To answer that, we have to start with a truth that makes all of us uncomfortable, and that is, as much as we would like it to be, attraction isn't entirely natural. It is constructed, taught, and reinforced through countless micro-interactions with culture, media, and social hierarchies, and for decades, that education has had a very specific curriculum. Whiteness has always been the default setting for desirability in contemporary Western culture. It is the neutral, the universal, the just happens to be that never has to explain itself. Centuries of visual, cultural, and political dominance have positioned white beauty as the standard in everything from magazine covers to Hollywood casting calls to who gets the final rose on reality TV. Given this, the phenomenon of marginalized communities as a whole developing preferences for whiteness should not be surprising. I mean, when one grows up in a world that equates whiteness with class, with intellect, with good looks, with good genes, it becomes almost inevitable that whiteness transforms from just a race into a standard, even for those it continues to exclude. I recently watched Jenny Livingston's 1990 documentary Paris is Burning for the first time and was struck by how this dynamic was captured with devastating clarity, particularly when a ballroom culture participant reflects on the ultimate fantasy.
This is white America. That is everybody's dream and ambition as a minority, to live and look as well as a white person. That's why in the ballroom circuit, it is so obvious that if you have captured the great white way of living or looking or dressing or speaking, you is a marvel.
This revealed how the ballroom scene, while creating space for Black and Latino queer expression, simultaneously upheld the same hierarchies that marginalized its participants, with categories like executive realness that celebrated the ability to embody white professional success. The documentary's most haunting moment for me comes when Venus Extravaganza describes her dreams of transition, not just of gender, but of race and class.
I would like to be a spoiled with rich white girl. They get what they want whenever they want it, and they don't have to really struggle with finances and nice things and nice clothes, and they don't have to have that as a problem.
The fantasy isn't simply about being accepted, it's about accessing the unquestioned privilege and automatic respect that comes with white embodiment. This dream of racial transformation speaks to something deeper than professional ambition, revealing the extent to which white supremacy has colonized the imagination itself. Within Black communities, the legacy of internalized hierarchy has long privileged lighter skin, Eurocentric features, and proximity to whiteness as markers of beauty, success, and respectability. If you spent any time on Black Twitter, you know this isn't new. Discourse on colorism and desirability is a monthly routine at this point. Rooted in colonization and reinforced through slavery and segregation, this hierarchy didn't disappear when laws changed. It evolved to the point where the systematic devaluation of Blackness occurs even within Black spaces. Research by psychologist Kenneth Clark, whose Zoltas helped inform the Brown v. Board decision, demonstrated how early and profoundly children internalize racial hierarchies. When Black children consistently preferred white dolls, describing them as nice, while calling Black dolls bad, they revealed the extent to which anti-Black messaging had penetrated their own self-concept. These preferences formed in childhood don't simply disappear in adulthood. They transform into a number of things, one of those being romantic and sexual desires that feel natural but are actually learned. And to be fair, things are changing. In recent decades, there's been a visible shift towards pro-Black consciousness, fueled by numerous movements in politics and pop culture. An increasing number of Black communities are actively working to instill pride in Black identity, pushing back against the old programming, from children's books featuring natural hair to animated shows centering Black protagonists, from affirmations like Black is beautiful to the encouraged visibility of Black love. We're teaching our children how to love their skin, their hair, their history, but most importantly, their people. But unlearning anti-Blackness isn't as simple as flipping a switch. Even in loving conscious households, internalized bias can linger. No number of Black media or hashtag Melanin Monday posts can fully counter a world that still centers whiteness and punishes deviation from it. But for me to sit here and say that every Black queer person who dates a white partner is acting out of self-hate would be reductive. We're discussing Black queer celebrities here, and this background will make a lot more sense as we continue. Desire, after all, is shaped by a complex mix of personal history and structural influence. It's not always a rejection of Blackness, at least not consciously, because even after one confronts and begins to unlearn the conditioning that is anti-Blackness, they often run headfirst into the second collision point: queerness. And unlike Black pride, which has rightfully become a value in many, many homes, queerness is still in many Black communities something to be corrected, silenced, or at best, politely ignored. The very community that teaches us to take pride in our Blackness is also the first to punish us for our queerness. Whether we are gay, bi, trans, non-binary, or simply gender non-conforming, we often grow up learning that some parts of ourselves are worth celebrating, while others, not so much. This message hits especially hard for femme Black boys and trans girls who exist at the precise interaction where racism, queerphobia, and femphobia collide. Like I mentioned in my DL Men video, in many Black communities, masculinity isn't just a cultural norm, it's a survival strategy. The historical emasculation of Black men during slavery, the myth of the strong Black man born in response to white supremacy's attempt to infantilize and dehumanize him, and the ongoing criminalization of Black male bodies have all contributed to a deeply embedded fear of appearing weak, vulnerable, or non-dominant. In this context, anything associated with femininity becomes dangerous, not just for the individual, but for what it supposedly says about Blackness as a whole. So when a Black boy walks with a sway in his hips, when he wears a lip gloss, when he speaks softly, or simply refuses to armor himself in hypermasculinity, he isn't just seen as different, he's seen as a threat to the entire race. This perception has birthed a kind of intra-community policing that masquerades as protection, but often manifests as violence. Jokes at the dinner table, emotional abandonment, religious condemnation, Twitter rants, and Black podcast hosts crying, "They're trying to emasculate the Black man." Whenever Black male public figures play with fashion, the Black femme queer child learns very early on that their visibility comes with consequences. Black trans girls and femme gay boys often experience their first rejection, violence, or abandonment not from strangers, but from Black men. Fathers who can't accept feminine sons, brothers who mock or threaten, potential partners who treat femininity as something to be scorned. Over time, this trauma carves out a psychological association. Black masculinity equals danger. So white men, by contrast, appear safer. only because they were never part of that initial betrayal. They weren't taught to police Black masculinity in the same way. It also does not help that when the Black queer child turns on the TV looking for themselves, they never get the opportunity to see a world that reconciles their queerness with their Blackness. Queerness, when it's affirmed, is almost always white. The love is white, the softness is white, the happily ever after is white. When they finally do see somebody who looks like them, the story is often steeped in pain. A first kiss interrupted by violence, a mother who cannot accept, a church that shuns, a boy running from himself, and when joy does exist, it's accompanied by whiteness, like in Love, Simon, where the only Black character's queerness is validated through his white partner's affection. So even if white communities carry their own brands of homophobia, they also offer a variety of queer narratives: fun, soft, romantic, awkward, domestic. Meanwhile, the Black queer child is fed a narrow, aching loop of suffering, rejection, and violence. This message is subtle but persistent. If you want a chance at a happy ending, you might need to cast someone white in the lead. You might need to move toward the gaze that's allowed to dream. And that gaze isn't just emotional, it's structural. French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu described cultural capital as the non-financial assets that confer social mobility: the way you speak, how you dress, how you carry yourself, what you consume, and who you are aligned with. Whiteness is exactly that, an invisible currency that grants access to spaces, opportunities, and social acceptance. This currency doesn't depreciate when it enters gay spaces. If anything, its value can increase. We know how very wide gay spaces tend to be, okay, and how cis white men are made to be the face of the queer community, even though they do the least amount of work.
All shade.
Choosing or being chosen by a white partner can significantly shift how one is perceived in social settings. For Black queer people navigating elite professional environments, whether in entertainment, in politics, or in corporate America, the dynamics become even more complex. Success in these spaces often requires figuring out how to be queer in a way that feels safe to others, and Black in a way that doesn't make anyone flinch. I mean, you are navigating environments designed by and for cis white-head people, thus the need for a form of protection against the compound marginalization that comes with being both gay and non-white in these spaces. A white partner then serves a function. They can attend industry events without being questioned. They can navigate exclusive spaces without being seen as a threat. They offer entry into white social circles, protection from certain types of racial microaggressions, can introduce their Black partner to networks that might otherwise remain closed, thus providing access to forms of privilege that might otherwise remain unavailable. So these public figures understand that their relationships become part of their brand. This type of relationship can also signal social elevation. A white partner becomes a symbol of having made it, of transcending not only sexual marginalization, but racial limitation. And this isn't unique to queer relationships. We see familiar patterns across the broader Black community, with high-profile examples like successful Black men in sports or entertainment often choosing white wives or girlfriends. And it's not that interracial love with white partners is often insincere or calculated. It would really sadden me for you to think that's what I'm trying to say. It's that love, like everything else under capitalism and white supremacy, is never apolitical. Even those who seem to see the whole board were still shaped by the system. James Baldwin, who spent his childhood being told he was ugly, unwanted, too dark, too queer, too much, went on to become one of the most brilliant and uncompromising Black queer writers of the 20th century. His works dissected American racism, capitalism, and imperialism with surgical precision. He did so not only as a Black gay man, but as a global intellectual who refused to make whiteness comfortable. Yet Baldwin's long-term partner was a white Swiss man named Lucien Harpersberger. This dynamic of radical Black politics, white lover, embodied the very contradiction he often wrote about: the seductive fantasy of whiteness, even as it remains the architect of your oppression. The same dynamic appears with Bayard Rustin, the chief architect of the March on Washington. Despite orchestrating one of the most important moments in Black liberation history, Rustin spent his last decade with Walter Eagle, a white lover. Here we have two men who dedicated their lives to exposing and dismantling white supremacy, who understood its violence and its mechanisms, yet both found love primarily with white men, revealing that even the most radical political consciousness cannot fully insulate someone from the broader cultural forces that shape desire. The intellectual understanding of these dynamics didn't make them immune to their emotional and psychological effects. Now, the Black community, better yet, the queer Black community, has been dissecting these tensions for decades. We've been telling stories about the ache of rejection, the allure of whiteness, the way desire gets shaped by trauma and capitalism long before these conversations hit the algorithm. We know the systems, we know the reasons, we live the contradictions. So why the backlash when a Ryan Russell pops out with a white man? Is it that we choose to conveniently forget everything we know just to be haters? Is it that we believe these public figures owe us queer Black love, even in the most intimate parts of their lives? Are we clinging to parasocial fantasies so tightly that we think if they reject their white partners, they might somehow make space for us? Is it bitterness? Is it pettiness? Is it jealousy? No, it's none of that. At least I hope it's not. The frustration isn't that these public figures have white partners, it's how they discuss it. And this isn't unique to the LGBT community. Straight Black men have been running this textbook for decades. Ask them why they like a white girl, and instead of saying, that's just who I vibe with, they start giving a TED talk about how Black women are too loud, too ghetto, too difficult. Sir, you could have just said I like blondes and logged off, but no. Oftentimes, these people make loving whiteness apparently seem like it requires a public roasting of your own people first, treating their Blackness, my Blackness, our Blackness, I'm sorry if you're non-Black watching this, like collateral damage. Take Steve Lacy, for example. When asked about his dating preferences, he didn't just say, I date who I date. No, he went out of his way to say that he wouldn't date Black men because he sees them as brothers and competitors. As if all Black men are one interchangeable group he grew up with. That's not a preference. That's a sweeping generalization wrapped in incest metaphors. By comparing every Black boy on this earth to the few he's known personally, Lacy effectively removed Black man from the realm of romantic possibility entirely, not because of chemistry, but because of proximity. And in doing so, he ended up reinforcing the racial hierarchy we just spoke about, elevating everyone else while subtly framing Blackness as too familiar, too close, too less than. The irony is, in trying to prove that he wasn't anti-Black, he gave one of the clearest examples of it. Then there was Jerrod Carmichael's 2024 HBO special where he made an unforced error for the ages by making a joke about partaking in race play with his white boyfriend.
Joke that like our relationship is like a slave and the master's son who like teaches me how to read by candlelight. Yeah, he groans too. He doesn't like that joke. I like that joke. That's my burden. I think that shit's hilarious.
Here was a successful Black comedian literally eroticizing the power dynamics of slavery with his white partner, then framing Black discomfort with that as a failure of humor, rather than a reasonable response to historical trauma being transformed into a bedroom fantasy. Even his Breakfast Club backpedal couldn't undo it because the joke exposed how the exact dynamics we've been discussing can manifest as literal sexual dynamics, with whiteness positioned as the dominant, educating force and Blackness as the submissive, grateful recipient. Next, we have Raven-Symoné, whose relationship with her wife Miranda often serves as a masterclass in how proximity to whiteness gets performed publicly, whether it's Raven's repeated comments about not being African American but rather American, her tone-deaf remarks about Black names on The View, or the way she and Miranda present their relationship as a beacon of post-racial love. The pattern is consistent. Blackness becomes something to be transcended rather than celebrated. In interviews and public appearances, she frequently positions her relationship as evidence of how love conquers all, a beautiful message that gets diluted when it reinforces the idea that Blackness is something one needs to move beyond in order to achieve enlightenment. And we can go on forever. I mean, we have people like Billy Porter, who, with his rise in fame, has continued to align himself with whiteness in the most insidious ways. We have people like Robert Smith, who continue to trash on Black men, though I've never seen a white man claim him. And the list can go on and on. However, I'm going to end with the most recent and most bewildering case, Miss Laverne Cox.
My ex-boyfriend, when we met 5 years ago at the height of the pandemic, he was 26, I was 48. He is blonde hair, blue-eyed, MAGA Republican voter who is a New York City police officer.
First of all, that shake and go wig.
I don't even think she shakes it.
But to get on camera and giddily reminisce about falling for a blue-eyed, blonde hair, Make America Great Again NYPD officer, In the year of our Lord 2020, during BLM protests, while trans people were being murdered with no justice in sight, all as a teaser for your upcoming show. An iconic black trans woman who's built her entire platform on challenging systems of oppression, talking about being madly in love with someone who represents the intersection of all those systems. The almost fetishistic way she described his blue eyes and blonde hair was just uncomfortable to hear. When you're a black trans activist describing your MAGA cop boyfriend like he's an Aryan poster child, you might have lost the plot entirely. And listen, it wasn't just that he was a Republican, he was the Republican, the kind whose party campaigned on legally erasing her, whose badge is part of an institution that has a long, violent history toward black and trans communities, especially in NYC. That's not a red flag, that's a whole crimson alert. And sure, women dating men who low-key hate them is nothing new. Dating a man often involves a sort of compromise of your values. We know many illiberal women out here marrying a Proud Boy and talking about voting to cancel out his vote, but it never gets less disappointing to hear. And here's where it gets truly unhinged. When the predictable backlash came, instead of engaging with the legitimate concerns about the cognitive dissonance of her choices, her first instinct was to post a TikTok from Anwar, the dating coach, discussing why dating black men is hard and apparently constitutes doing yourself a disservice. So not only was she defending her choice to date somebody whose entire political identity was built on harming people like her, but she was throwing black men under the bus to do it. Then the hour-long Instagram live came where she claimed she just fell in love with a human who had different politics and suggested that the left has a tendency to dehumanize people with different politics. The audacity is breathtaking. MAGA Republicans don't just have different politics, they actively dehumanize trans people on a daily basis. They pass laws to criminalize trans existence, they deny healthcare, they ban books that mention trans people, and create a culture where trans women, especially black trans women, face epidemic levels of violence. But somehow, Miss Cox expected her community to humanize somebody whose entire political beliefs literally dehumanize her. How does one reconcile advocacy for black trans lives with loving someone whose profession disproportionately criminalizes and brutalizes those same lives? How does one speak about systematic racism while sharing intimate moments with someone who voted for policies designed to harm your community? And most damning of all, how does one turn around and lecture black and queer people about being more understanding to the very people who want us gone? This is why resistance to interracial relationships with white partners will keep simmering, not out of ignorance or bitterness or some irrational hatred of love, but because too many times black queer public figures in those relationships fumble the moment. They don't just love white people, they align with them, defend them, joke with them about slavery, frame their blackness as a burden, a thing to escape. They don't just date across racial lines, they speak across them too, and often end up throwing their own people under the bus in the process. And that hurts. Not because we expect perfection, not because we think dating white people is inherently wrong. I would be very hypocritical to sit here and say that. But because there are so few of us with platforms in the first place. So few black queer public figures who get the mic, the Netflix special, the late night interview. And when those rare few finally get a chance to speak, not just about who they love, but about who they are, they end up distancing themselves from the very community that's cheering them on. You get it. Yes, it does feel unfair when someone like Kaytranada, who doesn't have problematic politics, gets caught in the crossfire. But that backlash, that tension, that's the community bracing itself, waiting for the inevitable letdown, because so many times it has come. And still, we're not asking every black queer celebrity to be James Baldwin. We're not asking for saints. We're asking for care. We're asking for people to understand that representation isn't just about being seen. It's about being seen whole. There are young black queer kids out there trying to figure out if they can ever be fully themselves, if there's a world where they don't have to choose between their blackness and their queerness, if there's a world where they can have a happy ending with anyone, white, black, Latino, Asian, etc., without diminishing a part of themselves to do that. because it doesn't have to be this way. But here's where I leave the conversation to you. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. This was a very, very long video, okay? I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a thing too. And I love you guys, and I'm gonna see you guys in the next one. Remember, if you do not slay, you do not stay in that zone, period. Also, cheers to 10K subscribers, to many more. Love you guys.